Are you going to make it a fun meeting?
That's the plan.
Good.
You'll tell me at the end whether it was.
There's Bonnie.
Hi.
Hi, Bonnie.
All right.
Great, we have a full house.
All right, that's wonderful. Let's get going. It's 3:01 on April 22nd, 2021. This is the Town of Loomis Land Use Subcommittee Taylor Road Downtown Business Corridor meeting. I would like to call this meeting to order. And before we actually go through the roll call, I want to read that pursuant to Executive Order N2920, certain provisions of the Open Meeting Act are suspended due to a state of emergency in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, consistent with the Executive Order. The 2020 General Plan Update Housing Element Committee, which it's not the Housing Element Committee, this is the Town of Land Use Committee, will be held via Zoom format. And how to participate is on our agenda. And there's a raise your hand feature at the very second to the last bottom ribbon. You would raise your hand and the clerk will allow you to join, and then you can, they will unmute you, or you can unmute yourself when that time comes. So with that said, this is going to be an exciting meeting today. Let's go ahead and have our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May we have roll call, please?
Yes. Chairperson Jan Clark Kretz.
Here.
Bonnie London.
Here.
Russ Kelly.
Here.
Jenny Nisley.
Here.
Tim Underco.
Here.
Maureen Valley.
Here.
Ryan DiMartini.
Here.
Auxiliary Member Jean Wilson.
Here.
And Auxiliary Member Ramona Brockman.
Here.
Okay.
All right, now's the time for committee comments for items not on the agenda. Does anybody have any comments? It looks like Bonnie does. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify when the housing element was going to the Planning Commission, if it was this Tuesday or if it's next month.
It'll be this coming Tuesday, the 27th.
Okay, and then are there any vacant lot sites that are in this particular district that are going to be in that housing element for the arena numbers?
That would be in the housing element, not part of this particular meeting. Or maybe I didn't understand your question.
Let me see if I can try it again. So with the land inventory that is in the housing element draft, are there any vacant sites that are in that draft that are in this area that we are meeting to discuss today?
Not for today's discussion, no.
No, but
I think she's try to maybe rephrase your question, Bonnie.
so if the Planning Commission is going to be meeting on Tuesday, this Tuesday, to review the draft of the housing element, I wanted to know if there were any vacant sites that are in this area that this group meets for in this subcommittee, because I think that if there are, that's something we probably should talk about.
Christy?
The vacant sites map for housing is online, so everyone can look at that. But I think for today's meeting, we have a prepared presentation that's on something else. So I don't know what our timing is on that.
I think the answer, Bonnie, is there are parcels identified along Taylor Road as vacant for the housing element. So I believe that is a true statement. But Again, that's not on the agenda today. The agenda is for the local agency commission to make their presentation.
So I think the question then is, can we please find out sometime during this presentation which lots those are that might be under the purview of this committee?
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions for items not on the agenda? Are there any members of the public that have any comment for items not on the agenda?
And public members, you can raise your hand and I will unmute you. Seeing none, Madam Chair.
Okay, now is the time for the committee to perhaps give a motion to adopt our agenda. Do I hear a motion?
I move to adopt it.
I second.
So that was Ryan and Russ.
Mhm.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Roll call
now-
vote?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so Jan Clark Kretz,
Aye.
Bonnie London,
Yes.
Russ Kelly,
Yes.
Jenny Nisley,
Yes.
Tim Underko,
Yes.
Maureen Valley,
Yes.
and Ryan DiMartini.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, now we are going to move on to the consent agenda. And it looks like that consent agenda is our minutes from the last meeting. Is there any committee members or public want to comment on that issue?
Seeing none.
Okay, may I have a motion from the committee to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, roll call, please.
I just second, my pen's not writing. Technical difficulty here. Okay. Jan Clark Kretz,
Aye.
Bonnie London,
Yes.
Russ Kelly,
Yes.
Jenny Nisley,
Yes.
Tim Underko,
Yes.
Maureen Valley,
Yes.
and Ryan DiMartini.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to committee matters, and I'm going to be passing it over to the Local Government Commission, LGC, to do the Loomis Streetscape Design Workshop. We're all very excited about this presentation and know that looking forward to hearing what y'all have. So go for it.
I guess that's me. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right. Welcome, everyone. I am just going to very quickly introduce the Sacramento Area Council of Governments and the Local Government Commission staff before handing it over to my colleague, Paul Zajkowski, who's going to be leading these activities today. So with SACOG, or the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, we have Greg Chu, who is the senior planner, and Robert Tadovich, who is going to be our Zoom guru today. I'm with Local Government Commission. My name is Kayla McDonald. I'm a project manager. I'm, like I mentioned, joined by Paul Zajkowski, who's a community design specialist. And we also have taking notes today and helping with facilitation, Diana Vasconzalez and Melissa Rivera-Zavala. So I just very briefly want to introduce Paul Zajkowski. He was the director of our community design team at the Local Government Commission between 1995 and 2019. During his tenure, he worked with over 250 communities to improve conditions, including working on projects with infill development, walking, bicycling, transit, and helping facilitate participatory design charrettes, which is very community focused with over 100 communities. He is also certified to facilitate workshops on walkable communities, safe routes to school, complete streets, and designs for pedestrian safety. And you're really going to be familiar with his expertise as he's going to employ all his experience during our workshop today. And with that, hand it over to Paul.
Thanks, Kayla. Now if I can just get PowerPoint working. Okay. There we go. Okay, great. Good afternoon. Can everybody see my screen? Yes, good. Excellent. So the first step of Zoom is working. Robert, did you want to say anything about just Zoom logistics?
I'm sure I'll just go over it real quick. It was mentioned before, but just a few Zoom housekeeping items before we really get started here. Any member of the public tuning in today and who wish to make a comment, you can notify us by selecting that raise your hand feature that was discussed earlier. Or if you're participating telephonically, you can hit *9. All right.
Okay, great. And we are going to be doing a number of activities today, mainly because the main purpose of this workshop is to get input from you, from residents and the committee on how people travel around the community and what works well, what doesn't work well, and what can be done to improve things. We're going to have two activities with the committee and the audience. The first is going to be what we call a virtual walkability audit. And in a minute, you'll see what that's all about. And the second will be basically a mapping exercise where we will be looking at a map on the screen, and you'll be able to tell us where you think there are issues, specific locations that we should make note of. Between those two activities, I will go through a presentation on creating safer and more complete streets. This presentation is partly based on the presentation I did for the Federal Highway Administration as part of a course on designing for pedestrian safety for upwards of 10 years. Again, the agenda, you can see it here. We're going to spend close to an hour on these two activities. My presentation is long, but I do talk fast, so I'll go through it quickly. We will have a few polls at various points to make sure you're all still with us. So just be waiting for those. And the polls are not meant to be of any great significance. They're mainly a way to break things up and give you a break, give us a break, and also maybe learn a few things. So the virtual walk audit, on the map you see here, I've sort of mapped out where we're going. Unfortunately, we don't have time to be stopping at numerous locations along the route. We only have about 10, 11 photos taken from these.
All that map isn't showing up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Very strange.
There.
You're seeing it now?
Presentation mode.
The presentation mode is not working?
No, presentation mode doesn't work.
Okay, let me try the other approach we came up with earlier, which is to stop share and then just share my desktop. And now let's see if this works. Can folks see the map?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know why. Sometimes it works in Zoom, sometimes that feature doesn't. So you can see the route. It's starting at Town Hall, moving northeast. Then there will be one photo we'll take from Horseshoe Bar Road, and then we'll continue on Taylor North and then come back on the other side of the street. So I'll give you a little bit of background on walk audits. This is something my organization and others have been doing now for quite a while. It's a great way to learn what works well and what doesn't in the community. It's a great way to get folks to observe all these things while you're walking, while you're not in your car or on a bike. Consultants who work with communities learn a lot from residents about challenges and opportunities. And of course, as part of your general plan update, we're hoping this will inform the team that's working on your general plan about some of the concerns with transportation in the community. It's also a way for everybody to learn about possible solutions. It's obviously, if we do it in person, it's very low tech, a little bit higher tech when we're doing it via Zoom. And we find that it's a great opportunity to learn while experiencing, and it's fun and easy to do. So this is one of the inventors, or maybe the publicizer of walk audits, Dan Burden, used to have an organization called Walkable Communities. He now works for another organization called Blue Zones, which is more related to health. But back 25 years ago, Dan was doing these. And basically what we do is we go out with a group of people, usually try to keep it to about 15 to 20. So there's a chance for people to interact and listen to each other. And while before we go out on the walk, we tell people, we know you're going to be socializing, but really try to pay attention to what's going on around you, what works, what doesn't. Does it feel comfortable to walk, say, with a friend or colleague side by side? Where does it feel safe? Where does it not feel safe? And also just from your observations of that location, tell us what you think. And then when we get to various spots along the walk, we will stop and we will talk. We will exchange ideas. Participants tell us what their concerns are, or what their issues are, and then we sometimes will talk about possible solutions. And sometimes, if conditions are right, we will even do a human curb extension or human bulb out, as you see in the top two images. Other times we'll go out and measure things and say, okay, this could be a different measurement, it could work better this way, et cetera. So it's a great sort of laboratory to learn about our streets. So in our walk audit, we're going to start at Loomis Town Hall, and I'm going to just, at each photo, I'm going to stop and just open it up. So I'll ask, I guess folks can either raise their hand or Mary Beth can open it up for committee members to just add their comments. So walking north, this might be the first section of sidewalk. Any ideas, comments? Does this work? To me, it looks like a very comfortable sidewalk. It looks like the kind of sidewalk you'd see in a traditional town. I love the art pieces, which also harken back to the history or actually connect the current events to the history. But what do others have to say? Don't be shy, just jump in. Does this work well? Do you feel comfortable walking here when you're out in town? Is this a place you go to? Whoops, sorry. Is this a place you frequent?
Yeah, I feel comfortable. I'm pretty proud of it.
Mm-hmm. When was the streetscape, when were the brick pavers and all that done? Is that a
2017?
Okay, yeah. No, I think it works well. I like you've really defined the different parts of the sidewalk with the different materials. You've got sort of a talk zone down the middle. It is, because it's a historic part of town, you don't have a lot of space to work with, but you've made good use of it. And you, of course, got the trees there to give you a nice edge and a buffer to the street.
I'm with Jenny. I love the way the streets turned out. It's the best that area has looked in a long, long time. If you were there 5 years ago, it was a much different scene, and those storefronts were empty. And today they have tenants in them, and they are lit up very well with nice lighting, and there's life and activity behind the doors, and it's as nice as we could have asked for, in my opinion.
Great, good to hear. Yeah, sometimes when communities embark on these streetscape projects, you're never quite sure how they're going to turn out. But I think in most cases, people do like the results. Okay, let me move on to the next photo. I think this one's maybe just too easy. Okay, crossing Horseshoe Bar Road. Any comments here? Again, it's been, the streetscape project to probably address this by putting in the very well marked crosswalks. Anybody have any other comments, ideas about this location?
No, but I do have a question. You're not going to go the other way down the street? You're just
I'm going to turn after this before we cross the street. The next photo.
This crosswalk, this section is good, but down the street, not so good.
Okay. And this is exactly why we're going to be doing the mapping exercise afterwards, because it's really not possible to go down every single street in the walk audit. And when we do them, we only usually cover about maybe 3/4 of a mile, maybe a mile. And that's why when we come back to the workshop, we like to have a map so that people can write down. And we always tell people, if we're not going to get to your street or the street you have concerns about, when we get to the map, tell us. So hold those comments if you don't see them in the next photo.
And if I may, this intersection is, if you are that silver car facing that direction, and we have, a lot of, that's where our train depot is. And so it's a real focal point for our entire town,
Mhm.
that intersection. So
Yeah, and it looks like some changes are happening here. So that might also, I mean, right now you have sort of a, you know, a building project in process, but when that's completed, that corner might also work well. The only thing I would have noted if I was leading a walk here is that you still have to push a button to get the walk. At least it appears that way. Some cities have the walk, right, the little walk signal on what's called recall, so that anytime the signal goes green to get the cars green to go through, it just says walk. And in downtowns, typically, that's what we expect. When we're in a more suburban area where there are fewer pedestrians, then we do put the buttons in because, you know, we don't have to basically, you know, stop cars for longer periods or signal the walk. That would be my only, I guess, critique of this intersection. Let's move on. So this is now, as I mentioned, down Horseshoe Bar Road at Library Drive, looking back west towards Taylor. And, you know, obviously Horseshoe Bar Road hasn't had a streetscape project like Taylor, so things are looking a little more, I guess, rural, small town. Any comments, ideas here?
So the one comment I have is there's the crosswalk that goes across, but there's a little shopping center, like, you know, with a few strip centers across the street from Rayleigh's, so a little bit further down.
Right.
And the bakery is nearby, and the nearest crosswalk to that actually is basically interchange of I-80 and Horseshoe Bar.
Right.
So I actually frequently walk this because I live a little out of town, but I go to Rayleigh's and park, and any business I have in town, I do while I walk. And then at the end, I go to Rayleigh's and pick up my groceries and go home. So, you know, for me, you know, jaywalking, to be honest with you, is kind of the most convenient way to get across to the little shopette and the bakery. And then to go further into downtown is because there's this crosswalk, and then of course by the highway, which is just like silliness to do that. So if there's some way to add a crosswalk, you know, because in Loomis, actually, people are pretty decent. They see you wanting to cross and they'll stop. But further down by the bakery and where the little shopping center is, that's across the street from Rayleigh's, would be really, really nice.
Okay, great. And again, when we get to that map, we'll make sure to put that down. Any other comments, concerns?
You know, yeah, so obviously the road needs some repair there. That's a well-traveled road. I can't tell you how disappointed it looks to drive into that section of town. And I can say that now that I'm not in public office, but you know, that whole stretch is really sad. And, you know, I've been wanting, you know, from the first time I ever came to Loomis to see that revitalized, and we had an opportunity to do it. We failed on that opportunity. So hopefully the next opportunity that comes forward, you know, we can make the right decision and get that area cleaned up, because that's all part of, you know, a larger vision there and a larger project. So that's my
okay. Great, good comments. Okay, let me move back to Taylor Road. And let me do a time check here. Okay, doing well. So again, here we're back on Taylor Road. There's that project that's being built on the right. Mary Beth mentioned that it's a coffee shop, so nice use anchoring that corner. Then we get to this location. Any comments, ideas, concerns here?
It looks bad. That's not a good. That's not a good vision for the town. I mean, you got weeds coming out of the cracks. You got, you know, it's just to the right. If you're to look to the right of that, you've got dumpsters that are out in the open, without covering. It's not beautiful there, and I'd like to see it stepped up. I've made that clear before.
Yeah, and this is a location where often when you have a parking lot right adjacent to a sidewalk, it's nice to have a buffer. You know, a lot of a lot of shopping centers will have some landscaping, something more attractive to look at than just, you know, the front end of cars parked there. Location of different things. Clearly, you know, this is an area that hasn't been addressed yet. Okay,
And if I can just include, I've had conversations with the property owner who's looking at restriping that parking lot, putting in trash enclosures and cleaning up that whole area.
Oh.
So it's a work in progress.
Yeah, those
Right.
bollards are like halfway leaning over. Looks like somebody hit those. You know, when he pulls his building permit, Mary Beth, he should clean up those bollards, and that should be required.
Yeah, and one thing he mentioned about all the light standards in the parking lot, they're going to go away, and the lighting will be fixed on the buildings and pointing into the parking lot. So all the light standards will go away, those bollards will go away, he'll have increased parking and that kind of thing. So that's his vision.
Okay, so it's getting worked on, or will be soon, you hope.
Work in progress.
Work in progress. Okay, getting closer to the intersection with Webb. Now here's, as a pedestrian, this is sort of a no man's land. There were no cars parked there when I took this photo, but if there were, you're sort of, unsure, where do you go here? Do you walk behind or do you walk in front? And it might be, something where you actually signal, as you have on the other side of the street, where you'd like to have people walk. If there's not going to be a redevelopment of this site, at least make it a little bit more comfortable for pedestrians.
Yeah, agreed. We really should have a sidewalk there.
Mm-hmm. No, I don't know if this building has other parking.
Yeah,
options.
around the corner, they actually block around the corner off too. It's a gym. So
Mhm.
because of the pandemic, I mean, I think that things have been closed off because of them having to exercise outside.
Mhm.
But it takes up a lot of our parking that's not available, or
Mhm.
around the corner even.
Right.
Just pointing that out.
Yeah. And these sites are tricky because, you sometimes don't have enough depth for both the parking and the sidewalk. So what do you do? Unless you can find the parking elsewhere, it's a challenge.
One of the concerns with this particular one is that this is a walkway where the kids go to school. And so when they're walking along here, they need to be up by the building so they're not intermixing with the traffic.
Right. That's right. You have a school just up the street. Yep. Are there crossing guards when the school is in session? Person? No.
No, in this crosswalk, the one up at the next intersection, I don't know if you're going that far up.
Yeah.
Not that one, but the one across Taylor is
At King, right.
good luck.
Right. Mm-hmm. Oops, sorry, my mouse keeps jumping here. Okay, let's keep walking. Now we've crossed Webb Street and we're continuing on Taylor. And anybody see what's wrong with this picture?
Well, Mr. Pickle's sign is in the sidewalk. Makes us all want to have a sandwich.
And the truck's parked in the bike.
Right.
Right. And what's interesting about this photo, I was there last Sunday. My colleague, Josh Meyer, was up there a couple of weeks earlier. And both of us took pictures. Sorry, both of us took pictures of this location. And in both cases, there was a vehicle parked in the bike lane.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly that doesn't seem to be something that motorists understand either. I noticed there's only this marking here. Sometimes it's good to mark the bike lane at various locations along the block just to make sure that message is reinforced.
But maybe we need no parking signs.
Right. Yeah, I think something else needs to be added that gets the message across. And then there's always, if people are still not obeying, there's always parking tickets.
Well, and then the red, we need to paint that curb red.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
because it's not clear when you're driving that that's not a parking. I mean, I know there's bike lane here, but it's not clear, and that's always packed. That center and the next coffee house, it's always packed.
Oh. Sorry. Okay, good to know. So maybe some fairly easy fixes in terms of a sign and painting curbs red and so on that City Public Works could take on.
Are we turning the corner? If you go back to that, I do have a comment. So we brought this up before, Jenny, when we did a downtown walk prior, and there were several others on that walk. But those open dumpsters, I think, are really and I don't know how we address this in land use, but those open dumpsters that aren't enclosed are a real drag. And there's one right there in the corner over by the
Yeah, you can't see it from here. Okay.
yeah, in the previous one, right next to right there. Then you've got one in front of Taylor's, and you've got one in
Yep,
front of
around the corner of this raw fit, he puts it all the way out, right across from Ugly Mug.
it just looks sad, and it looks like, you know, when you have dumpsters with garbage out there on your main drag, it just, you know, it's not very prideful. And so, I mean, I don't know how we address that. That would be a question for staff, but how technically do we get aggressive about those kind of things? But you know, it's not good.
Yeah, and you know, those are opportunities sometimes. Boy, it keeps jumping, for code enforcement to address, or you know, staff to write a letter or whatever.
Well, I don't even know if you know what the language in our municipal code says about that. That would be something I would ask of staff to look into. But you know, and if we don't have anything in there about enclosing dumpsters on Taylor Road in our commercial areas, then how do we do that? You know, is that about drafting an ordinance? Is that go in the general plan process? You know, I don't know. Staff, that would be something, again, I'd ask of staff to give us some direction on how do we address things like that?
You know, Tim, real briefly, is you do want in your ordinance a discussion of improved walkable streets, and we could do that. And then issues for enforcement, you have to have a code of ordinance that would, you know, limit that. So it's a kind of a two-step process. So first is make sure our goals policies clearly state what we want to do, and then the implementation will be a code.
Is that done through legislative action or through general plan? You know, I mean, is this committee, is that what this committee's set up to do, is make these kind of recommendations?
It is. This committee should recommend, you know, that the general plan identifies that these areas need to be walkable and improvement. And one of the implementation measures of this portion of the general plan could be update the code of ordinances to enforce. So yes, this committee can do that.
All right. Well, that's my 2 cents. If, you know, are we putting like all of our comments down, and then we're going to circle back to those comments at the end of the meeting or at a later date? Is that the process?
Carla is taking notes on all of this right now, and what we'll do is we will circle back. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great. Okay. Any other comments? Let's get up to the crossing at King Road. It is a long crossing. That's always a challenge. It's a challenge not just for pedestrians. I like to point out to folks that motorists also sometimes find these intersections challenging because they have to stop and wait for much longer at these. So we try to think, especially in our town centers, how do we keep intersections as compact as possible? So something to think about. I don't know if folks have concerns here, but especially with the school right behind me. And I gather this is where you might have a crossing guard at this location. None?
Yes. On the others, they use the other crosswalk.
Oh, I see.
On the next one.
Okay. So going further north, or
going towards the high school, yes. The next,
towards the high school.
Right on the other side of this four-way, on just the next one.
And do you know why they choose that one and not this one that's right near the school?
I think I've seen both. I think they sort of try to manage both.
I think so too. Yeah, there's been, because that's right by Loomis Grammar, correct?
I know, but they do. They come up, they bring them across the other way, and then across King on this side, not on the railroad side.
The reason, there's not a sidewalk on this side on King Road, and so kids use the other side because there's a walking path, not a walking path, but a sidewalk, an improved sidewalk.
Okay. Any other comments? Questions? Okay. So now we've crossed the street. We're walking back. We're at that section. I guess this looks like a very new sidewalk. I don't know when this was installed, but suddenly the sidewalk ends, and now you're sort of out in, again, a bit of a no man's land here. Is the intent to continue the sidewalk in the future, Mary Beth? Is there any plan for that? No.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, that unfortunately that area, there's some logistical issues with that slope right there, but that sidewalk really was needed to go all the way. But I think Russ might be able to give us a reason why that didn't happen.
Okay.
Part of the thing that happens here from just about the top of the sign is the access to the parking lot. And as part of the rural character of the fruit shed, what we tried to do is maintain the fruit shed access very similar to what it was back in the day. And we looked at a lot of different options to do that without impacting the the fruit shed so that you couldn't even get in there. So that's, you know, there may be something that we didn't think about, but the rural character of the front of the fruit shed with parking is absolutely critical to the businesses there and things that are going on. Part of the access problem was handicap parking. You know, we had 10 handicap parkings across the front of the building during events, and those sometimes are needed. I personally put those up during some of the events, cowboy poetry and that sort of thing. So we have had long discussions with the town to see what we might do. If you look at when we get to the other fruit shed, you'll see that we've done the same thing down there, and that has worked out really well. So that's kind of where we were with that.
Okay. Yeah, and again, this is why we need some of the local history and story about some of these things. Because when I came along here, I wondered, well, why isn't there a curb and an entrance to the parking lot, maybe from one end, but then you come out of the other side. But I guess the intent was to keep this with a more rural character, not having any sidewalk there. I also noticed there is a site on the side of the shed that possibly could be used for parking. I don't know, but so I would have just said, well, move the parking to the side, do something else. But clearly, there's some reasons why the community wants it this way.
Well, when we have events, all that parking is used.
Right.
And there's some other options to have some events there, just besides the tavern, as well as what goes on in the Blue Goose. But all that parking is used. It overflows into the town parking, and in a lot of cases, it even flows over into use over at the grammar school.
Okay. So, good to know.
I think that the last town council meeting, when we were discussing this project, we all sort of agreed that, there might be an opportunity for an engineer to come up with a way that it comes up with a safe way to walk right there and also doesn't take away from the rural character there. So I am holding out hope that this will be a sidewalk at some point or a safe area for walking.
Right. Okay, let's keep moving. I think I'm going to end with this last image. You can sort of see, from my understanding, these two lines are sort of to indicate a walking path in front of the Blue Goose, and then that rejoins the sidewalk back closer to the I guess the intersection with Webb Street. So now here again, the mention of dumpsters out on the very visible location, I might add, does detract from the aesthetics of the place. Okay.
According to the comments from Christy, that she pulled up the municipal code. I mean, that we already have something in the book, so I don't think there's any action that this committee can actually do other than request for maybe a plan to help the business owners to create some enclosures there.
Right.
We even talked about that. Maybe there's money in the facade program that could help that. I don't know, but I've given my 2 cents plus 10 on this. This issue, so I'll rest.
Okay. So I'm gonna stop the virtual walk audit at this point and jump into the presentation. let's see if this works. I think this should just work simply this way. Can everybody see the new screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I think you sort of get the intent of the walk audit. Again, it's not the same when we're not together out there walking the street. I mean, that's a different experience. But, you know, you all live in town, you can all go out on walks, and soon we will be able to do these walk audits in person. What I'm going to talk about is a little bit broader than streetscape, I'd say. It's really about creating safer and more complete streets in small towns. And I'm as I said, I've got a fair amount of material to cover, but I will go through it quickly. And hopefully, you know, we'll have a chance for questions at the end, I think, just to make it smoother. And then keep an eye out for the polls that you'll be asked to answer shortly. So I often like to start out any presentation on streets to just remind everybody that why we have towns and cities. And that's to exchange things, to exchange goods, culture, friendship, knowledge. Humans are social beings. So having places where we come together and can do that and minimize our travel is, you know, a really incredible thing about towns and cities. We don't have to travel long distances for all of these things that we need. The challenge is that we have built a lot of places forgetting that. And this is actually comes from a mayor who, after he became mayor, said he had realized that we'd created a really great city if you're a car, but forgot about people who were, you know, coming to that community, even forgetting about the businesses, because when you just have big streets that people speed on, they're not going to stop at businesses. The mayor, by the way, was the former mayor of Oklahoma City, Mick Cornett. So, and it's often a question of land use. It's a question of how we locate buildings on a site that create or detract from the streets. So here we see what could be sort of a typical development in a small town. We've got a shopping center, some stores and so on, not very well organized. Cars seem to dominate because the parking's adjacent to the street. But if we thought about how to lay out these uses in a different way, we could envision something like this, where you'd actually have the sense of a walkable place where you still have the parking, but the parking is located behind or to the side of the buildings. And you now created a much more vibrant and economically viable place because people will stop and shop and walk to different stores and so on. So I like to ask people, you know, would you rather spend time on a street like this where it's just basically moving traffic, it's sort of a traffic sewer, or a street like this where you can actually enjoy yourself, relax, get out, shop, buy things, or just hang out? So we know that folks want more options for transportation. These are a series of surveys that the National Association of Realtors has been doing now for quite a few years. This one is 2017. And you'll notice when they ask people, you know, what's important about where you decide to live, sidewalks and places to take walks was one of the highest responses. Being within an easy walk of other places and things in the community also got a very strong response. Obviously, people want easy access to the highway to get to work and so on. But also quite a few people favor the idea of bike lanes and paths, being able to get places not always by car, and separated bike paths or trails when you can locate those trails to connect different destinations. There was actually, it's interesting, in 2020, in February and July, the Association of Realtors did a second poll just to see what was happening during the pandemic. And you'll notice, I'm going to move this to the side, that I don't know if your screen will let you see this if you've got the images on the side, but basically you can see the arrows coming up there. What's interesting is that after, from July to February, I'm sorry, from February to July, we started seeing, we started seeing people not being as concerned about a short commute to work because they're working from home, but people still liking the idea of having easy walking places to walk to, and easy access to the highway was even less important because now clearly, again, more people working from home, but still a strong support for some of these concepts of walkability. So here's poll number one. So you're going to have a few seconds here to answer it. Mary Beth is going to put the poll up. There you go. how far would you be willing to walk to get to a coffee shop or restaurant in Loomis? This is an anonymous poll. Just click on one of these. And when you're done, hit submit. And in a few seconds, we'll be able to see what the consensus is. So is everybody voted? Let's see, 10 to 12 minutes, or we start 5 to 6, 10 to 12, 15 to 18. So these are average walking speed, times to get to these locations. Okay, has everybody got a chance to vote? So Mary Beth, now let's see if we can bring up the results. There we go. Okay. So interesting. This is very, very similar to what we see in most communities. Most folks say, yeah, I'm very comfortable walking, up to about 10, 12 minutes. And here we see 75% of you voted that way. A few of you, however, are the outliers. You're willing to walk longer distances, even as much as 2 miles. So that's great. But most places, when we think of walkable destinations, we like to think of a radius of about a half a mile. So I'm going to close. Let's see, can I close that? Yes. Okay, good. So now here's this arrow. So now let's look at if we took the intersection of Horseshoe Bar Road and Taylor as sort of the center point of a walking radius. There's a half a mile. Now, of course, that's as the bird flies, right? So as the crow flies, streets are obviously going to make, when we have to take streets that don't go directly those distances, so we're going to have to maybe take a little longer. So here's 2 destinations I mapped out in Google Maps just to see. So these are the destinations that are about a 10 to 12 minute walk. So a little bit less than that half mile radius, but you see it does encompass quite a bit of housing that's nearby. And again, for people who are willing to walk more than that 10 to 12 minute walk, they can even go farther. If we jump to the next slide, we see sort of those walking routes. So here's a 10-minute walk on the left up to this location, and here's an 11-minute walk over here. So, good amount of the community is covered by that. And of course, there's always pedestrians in Loomis. When I was there, when my colleague was there, we got quite a few shots of all types of pedestrians, young folks, older folks, people walking their dogs, teenagers, etc. And the surveys tell us again that, a lot of folks are willing to walk. In fact, about 46% in national surveys said they'll walk a mile to church or school. About 35% will say they'll walk a mile to work. That's more in the 20 to 24 minute range. Now let's look at bicycling. Again, from that same location on Taylor Road and Horseshoe, if we look at about 1.8 mile radius, that's again a 10 to 12 minute ride if you're going 10 miles per hour. And again, I sort of to verify that I was right. So here's the high school. So from here, I figured that's about halfway, maybe a little less. So let's see how it actually shows up as in bicycling on Google Maps. And then here's another location way down here. And we notice again that, the locations are a little bit shorter of that radius, but still give us a good sense of how we go. And when we're looking at bicycling, we want to look in both directions, right? Because of hills. So here's going from the town center to this location, route time repair, and here's the return trip. In your case, there are hills, but they're not as daunting as I've seen in some communities. And if we go to the next image, now going up to the high school, again, we see about a 5-minute ride in almost half a mile. So just at that 0.9 mile, at about 1 mile, close to that 1 mile distance.
Hey, Paul.
Yeah.
Can we go back to your last slide real quick?
Mm-hmm.
So what's interesting is you picked that brew time repair. That's my neighbor. And
oh, really?
So that's a dirt road. Mm-hmm. And I just want you to know that Laird Road, if that is a very dangerous part of our area to ride. Those are very, very narrow rural roads that are heavily trafficked. And if I could make any wish, it would be to make these rural roads really safe for peds and bike. And I used to live over on to the I guess, on another part of Loomis where it was really easy for me to walk out of my house and go for a walk. But I literally live right by Brewtime Repair, and I have to drive in my car to Montserrat in order to have a place for me to walk that's safe. So just so you know, this little map that you've drawn, it's very dangerous for a bike ride. Just wanted
No, good to know. And often in rural areas, we may not say, well, we need to add bike lanes. Maybe there's opportunities for trails or to build a shared use trail that's alongside the road, maybe separated from the road. So things to think about in the future. And the one thing I will say is there is more funding from the Active Transportation Program for communities to start building those types of facilities. Yes, somebody had a comment?
Yeah, Paul. Horseshoe Bar from Interstate 80 to Horseshoe Bar stop sign is absolutely horrifying to ride. You cannot ride that with any kind of safety at all. I ride bikes. I used to do 24 miles, 3 days a week. And that is one of the worst places that I've ever had to drive, riding my bike.
Okay, good to know. We'll make a note. So again, we did see cyclists, but most of them ones I saw were on Taylor Road, on some section of it where there is that bike lane.
Yeah, there are a lot of cyclists. This is a heavy cyclist area, but yeah, there's definitely roads that you would avoid. Horseshoe Bar really for a long stretch being one of them.
Yeah.
So my interest, like you were mentioning, is to see if there's some way, instead of just having the bike lane on the side of the road, it helps a little. Like Auburn Folsom has kind of a large bike lane on the side of the road, which has a lot of bike traffic. But I think for Loomis, if there's some way to get some connectivity throughout Loomis on, a multi-use trail or something like that, where pedestrians and bicyclists could go, that's off-site. Or even off to the side of the road, even just a ways, so that everybody feels safe. I think that would be just amazing. And then people like myself that live a little bit out there could have a place to go pretty quickly to be able to take a walk. And instead of always having to, like me, get in my car and drive somewhere where I could go walk. I mean, I have my few streets where I live where I can do it, but it's really, hit and miss whether or not if you live kind of out in the more 4.6, 2.3 acre areas as to whether or not you can actually get a walk in without getting in your car. So I think that would be a big benefit to Loomis.
Great. We'll definitely make a note of that. Those are the kinds of comments we want to hear. And unfortunately, I actually had some images of those trails that I used in a presentation in Placer County a few months ago, but I did not put them in today. But I think that's really key. So here's poll number 2. Here's sort of getting at what kinds of cyclists we're talking about here. These are 4 categories that I guess nationally have now come down to be sort of the way we classify different types of cyclists. They're the strong and fearless, enthused and confident, and so on. So Mary Beth will launch the poll if she hasn't already, and just click on one of those 4. Tell me, are you one of the top 3, or are you in the no way, no how you're getting on your bike? Oh, sorry.
Can I make a little bit of a comment since everybody's doing their poll right now?
Yeah.
What's interesting about that poll is, on the flip side, for the people that live in town and you're in your car and you're trying to get around people that are biking on our rural roads, it's very scary. And there is, I guess, a map that the cyclists are viewing that basically say, this is where you guys want to bike, and it comes right on these rural roads. So as a driver, it's stressful. You have to, wait and get by them. And so it would be good for both cars and bikes to have some way to maneuver around each other.
Sure. Let's see the results. Let's see, Mary Beth's going to show that. Okay. So a lot of you are in that second category. That's good. A few of you are in the no way, no how. I'll show you later what we see nationally and what we see in larger polls, sort of where things sort of seem to be, what the trends are these days. So let me talk a little bit about complete streets. I think maybe most, if not all of you, have probably heard that term. It's been used now for about 15 years. And it basically just means streets that work for everyone, no matter who you are or how you travel. They're designed for people, not just cars. So we want to make sure that balance is considered. They need to be friendly to all the different users that are going to be on those streets. We want them to be safe, comfortable, and convenient, whether, again, you're in a bike, in a car, or in a bus, or walking, obviously. We also want them to be safe, comfortable, and convenient if you're young, old, able, disabled. We really need streets. Streets are the way we navigate our communities. We want everybody to feel like they can get around comfortably and safely. So I'm going to talk about some basic principles about how we create those more complete streets. And one of the most fundamental of those is speed. And I'll talk about three things that are affected by speed. And this is why once we get in communities, we want to make sure speeds are not on the higher end. We want to bring them down. So one of the first issues is that as speed increases, the driver focuses less on surroundings. So that means they're less likely to notice, that child who's maybe running into the street or trying to get a ball. They're less likely to notice, pedestrians on the street or even bicyclists. And they're also less likely to notice the businesses that are along that street. So it's not healthy for businesses to be on a street where cars are going fast. The second issue with speed is what happens when a car has to come to a stop because something happens ahead of it. So you'll notice that at 20 miles per hour, cars can typically react and stop in about 100, maybe a little more than 100 feet. But when you just double that to 40 miles per hour, now it's 3 times the distance to bring that car to the stop. And that's just simply the physics and I guess biology of recognizing the problem and bringing the ton of moving car to a stop. And then finally, when we hit a pedestrian at 20 miles per hour, most of those pedestrians will survive. But when you just double that again to 40 miles per hour, only 1 out of 10 pedestrians will survive, and typically they'll be severely injured when they do. So a lot of emphasis on bringing speeds down. And what that means is we want to think about how drivers respond to the road and how the road feels. So here's another poll. We're going to ask you, as you approach this town, you can see it's the town of Coburg, I think up in Oregon, historic Coburg. What makes the motorist slow down? What does the motorist see that makes them slow down? And I've given you a list of, I think, I guess seven issues, well, 6 rather, and then all of the above. Speed limit sign, gateway sign, sidewalks, trees, houses, people, all of the above. Any one of those, or is it all of those? So again, Mary Beth, launch the poll, and let's see what folks come down on.
Okay. There we go.
Okay, there you go. So now you've got your choice. And you've had a chance to study the location, so you should have a good idea of what you want to say. Okay, have we gotten everybody voting?
Okay.
Let's see what the results are. Aha, yes, all of the above. And that is the answer. It really is all of those things. Yes, speed limit sign helps. All of these are important, but it's really all of it. It's the change in land uses, and it's the change in the road. It's the way the road feels. And it is, for those of you who have, I guess, people's pictures on the right, you probably didn't see the speed limit sign because that's hidden by the Zoom photos. But there is a speed limit sign over to the right. And in the next image, what I often tell people is curbs and sidewalks are going to slow traffic more, and basically what you see up ahead than that speed sign, unless, of course, there's a police cruiser parked nearby. Then, of course, we're always checking to see what is the speed limit sign. But it's really, what we see ahead that changes our behavior as motorists. And this is something that the Federal Highway Administration and everybody strongly recognizes, as they put it in this guide. Drivers read the road, not the design plans. So, and I would add, not necessarily the speed limit signs either. They're reading the road. If this, a big wide street like this, you're going to feel more comfortable speeding up than on a narrower street. So we have to then, yes, sorry.
Bonnie has a question.
Sure.
It wasn't so much a question as it was a comment. Over in the Montserrat community, which is a residential area, and it's a thoroughway between Barton and Laird Road. And we do have signs that say the speed limit is 25 miles an hour, but people just fly through it. And we even have at least 2 roundabouts. And I can tell you, I mean, kids do donuts in them and stuff like that too. So I'm just wondering if it's also maybe a culture that we're dealing with too.
Well, the roads in Montserrat are too wide. That's one of the reasons why.
Yeah.
The wider the road, the faster you're going to feel comfortable going. So if there's ways to make that road feel narrower or look narrower, maybe there's something after the fact that you could do to help that out.
Yep.
It would slow everybody down.
And that's exactly what we're talking about in this image. Is we want the streets to be designed. Oh, geez, it keeps jumping around. To be designed so that we understand what the proper speed is. Where we're in a 45 mile, if you're out on the highway, you don't want obstructions, you want big wide lanes and so on. But as we approach town centers, we want to make sure that the street changes its design, its configuration, so that people slow down. So I'm going to show you these 2 images. I will point out that the image on the bottom is of a street in Stockton where my wife and I were almost killed by a motorist going in the opposite direction, who was speeding and went out of control and came all the way across to pretty much where that white car is. And we ended up perpendicular to the street up on the sidewalk. Fortunately, bruised and battered, but we all were wearing seatbelts and survived. So, I would ask you, where would you prefer to walk? The upper image or the lower one? And on which street is it safer to drive? I think I've already given that answer away by this, my story. But what's interesting about this image is that both of them are carrying about the same number of cars per day, about 16,000 cars per day. The street above carries about that, and the street below does. And that tells us that we don't always need to add more lanes to move the traffic. We can move 16,000 cars per day in one lane very comfortably. We don't have to always jump to bigger streets as a solution. And we also don't want to oversize our traffic lanes. And there are criteria. I mean, I'm not going to get into the details but about up to 18,000 cars can fit comfortably in one lane of traffic. If it's spaced out over the day. The other issue is traffic lanes. We don't necessarily need to oversize traffic lanes. 12 feet lanes are what we use on our freeways and highways. 10 and 11-foot lanes have been found to be just as safe as 12-foot lanes when we're on urban streets or urban arterials where the speeds are less than 45 miles per hour. So in this case, just through a photo simulation, we showed how you can narrow down those lanes, and in this case, add a bike lane. So, and I like to remind people that there are a lot of lanes out there in our region that are 10 feet that work perfectly well. This is one in Rancho Cordova, right off Highway 50. So it's a big street carrying a lot of traffic, and yet they found it worked perfectly well to go down to 10 feet. And this is something where I think traffic engineers still sometimes tend to oversize streets, and we have to start recognizing we don't have the space to do that. And we can start making the street more complete by, for example, giving a little bit more space, in this case, to the bicyclists. We also want to think about how we define the edge of the roadway. So this is a small town I worked in a few years ago in Ventura County, and I don't have the after, but I do have some photo simulations of what we recommended to change the feel of that street. And it still has, a rural sense, rural context. It's not like we're putting a lot of, concrete and asphalt, but I think we're creating a street that still is safer and yet still maintains the character of the place. Ideally, it would be nice if we could do all of our changes with Photoshop and they'd happen just like that. But of course, it takes a little bit more work. This is a street, actually a highway that Caltrans decided to slow down through the town of Capay. simply by colorizing the shoulders and making them look like stamped brick. It's all asphalt. It's just colorized and stamped. Again, to make it feel like you're coming into a different place. So it's changing the context and slowing down the speeds. In this case, we see the speed limit 35 miles per hour. Also think about how we create buffers to parking lots. I mentioned that earlier on the walk, that it's not comfortable always to be just walking by cars. So in this case, we took this little parking lot and just showed how you actually could make a much more attractive business and still maintain the parking that you might need in that business. And a lot of examples around the place, from the bottom left image, for example, is Placerville, of just how they buffered the parking with landscaping. Of course, another way to signal to motorists that they're coming into a different place is through gateways. So here we see different types of over the street gateways. We can see big monument signs. You have a monument sign on the side of the road coming in on Horseshoe Bar Road. And sometimes you can do smaller, monument signs like this one in downtown Cloverdale. So it's signaling not the entrance of the city or the town, but the entrance to a part of the town. Roundabouts, I should add, can also create great gateways, and they also help reduce vehicle speeds because you have to slow down. If a roundabout's well designed, you can't go through it at faster than about 20 miles per hour. And they still move traffic safely and smoothly. I don't know how many of you have experienced roundabouts. I didn't see any when I was in Loomis. I don't know if you've gotten any yet, but it's very simple. It's a yield intersection. As a motorist comes in, they slow down. If there are no cars in the roundabout, they proceed through and can make a right. They can go straight through, can make a left or a U-turn. Very good to make U-turn. And I should point out that truck apron that you see there is for larger vehicles that need to maybe make a left turn or even going straight. It's a little bit higher than the street, a few inches higher, but their rear wheels can mount on that to make those harder turns. So roundabouts are being built all over the country because they are safe and they move traffic efficiently. This is a before and after. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I hate to interrupt, but I have a question on roundabouts and bicycle safety. So how does that work when you have a roundabout and bicycles using that?
Sure. Well, two things. If you go to Davis, which has a lot of bicyclists, there are two approaches that they've taken. With a single lane roundabout, bicyclists often take the lane because they're going at about the speed of the cars. They can go 15 to 20 miles per hour. So you see most bicyclists just take the lane and go through. But a lot of roundabouts are also designed with basically an escape ramp so that they can basically go onto the sidewalk, ideally walk their bike, and then cross at the crossing. So a less experienced or less confident bicyclist would do that. And I have images, I don't have them in this presentation, but showing how that's done and has been done. 2-lane roundabouts are a lot trickier, but single lane are usually quite straightforward for bicyclists, and they seem to understand that they work well and use them. I have this image here just to show you the efficiency of roundabouts. Here's a street, an intersection that has, you can see 6 lanes across in this direction. This is the before picture in Asheville, North Carolina. This is the after. Notice you can see the same buildings in the background, way in the background there. And look how they went from 6 lanes to 2. Why? Because the intersection is now working more efficiently. Cars are moving through it at a slower speed, but they're moving smoothly through it. And basically, when a roundabout, you can have cars entering the roundabout from all 4 directions at the same time. You don't get that with a standard signal. So you typically can get about 40, 50% more vehicles through an intersection in a roundabout than signalized. They're also very safe. The Institute for Highway Safety back in 2000s was already touting the safety benefits, one of which is obviously the lower speed, but the other is far fewer conflicts. With a typical single lane roundabout, we only have 8 vehicle to vehicle and 8 vehicle to pedestrian conflicts. When we go to a typical 4-way intersection, we have way more points of conflict. So I'm going to ask you another poll question. Let's see if anybody can guess this one. This one's a tough one. Approximately how many roundabouts do you estimate have been built in the US? So I didn't know the answer till I looked it up. So this is not one that I think anybody, unless they've been studying roundabouts, will already know. So this is more of a fun question. Okay. How are we doing, Mary Beth? Have we gotten a lot of responses? Let's see what the answer is. Let's see how many of you nailed it. Pretty close, pretty close. It actually is closer to, it's 7,000. It's a little bit over 7,000 and this is again, one of these things where a consulting firm has been keeping track and they're not even sure if they've caught all of them, but it's about, they say about between 7,000 and 8,000. So close. Here's a second part of this. I guess it's a two-parter. Which city in the US do you think has the most roundabouts? And again, take a wild guess. And I'm going to guess that nobody's going to guess this one unless you've studied roundabouts, but I may be wrong. Okay, let's see, Mary Beth, how are we doing?
Got one more.
Okay.
There we go.
Time. Okay, I think one person, Carmel, Indiana. Carmel, Indiana. They have, I had to look it up, 138 roundabouts. Yep, the mayor of Carmel, I think, found out about roundabouts, I think the story goes 20 years ago or something, and loves them. And he has put them in on many streets. And it's, become sort of the signature of this small town near Indianapolis. I did visit it some years ago, and they're there. You see them all over the place. The other thing I'll talk about just briefly is while we're talking about circles, I thought I'd just throw in mini circles. These are not meant to be what, as robust as what a roundabout does. These are just for traffic calming. You typically put them in the middle of an intersection and you take out the stops and you make it a yield intersection. So motorists, as they approach, slow down. This is, we found in Seattle, they did research on this, I think about 15 years ago. They put in a lot of roundabouts, mini circles, and they found a 77% reduction in crashes in those neighborhoods. So they seem to work because motorists slow down at the intersection and they have to yield. They can also be things of beauty. You can, landscape them. You can have a neighborhood maintain them, as I've seen in some communities. Sacramento has a few in Midtown, and they seem to work very well. The ones in Sacramento, they actually have stops on the cross street, so it sort of defeats some of the purpose of getting everybody to yield. So I'm going to talk briefly about how pedestrians can be helped getting along and across the street. And one of the keys to that is connectivity. When we have a disconnected street system like we see on the right, it's really hard for people to get to destinations by walking because we no longer have those direct connections. So here's a home. Let me see if I can get this to work. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Here's a traditional pattern like you would have in downtown Loomis, in town center of Loomis. And you'll notice it's fairly simple. Oops, what's going on here? Okay, to get to school for a child, maybe a 5-10 minute walk, and it's a direct route. But when we go over to the more suburban disconnected network, you've now taken what would be normally a half a mile or quarter mile walk and turned it into 2 miles. And on the way home, if you're driving in a car, you now have 3 left turns, which is where you have more conflict, so it's less safe. So generally, what we like to say is try to have as much connectivity, even if it's, you don't always have to have streets that connect. Sometimes it's just, connecting those cul-de-sacs so that somebody can walk or even take a bike through and get to the other neighborhood. By the way, we still don't know how these folks get in and out of their community. We think they go by helicopter because the graphic artist forgot to connect it to the street. But anyway, so connectivity really can help create a more walkable street system by reducing walking distances, creating more route choices, and dispersing traffic. That's the other point I didn't make, is that you'll notice that the streets here on the edge of this community are much bigger because you're funneling a lot of traffic onto a few streets. In this network of streets, because you have more choices for trips, you can keep those streets smaller. So let me move on. Okay. Oops, again, okay. Trails are another way, as I said, of maybe sometimes connecting. You can do that, connecting cul-de-sacs. You can also create trails that allow people not to necessarily use the street. And again, Davis is an example of a city that has done that really well, because what they've done is created like a parallel trail system that connects to the schools without crossing streets. So they have underpasses and overpasses at the street crossings and make it very efficient for kids and safe for kids to get to school. I know you have a trails master plan. I took a look at it. Looks like there are some plans there over time to build that out. And I would just encourage you to look for and expand any of those trail connections. When it comes to the sidewalks, okay, I want to move this along because we got to get to the mapping. So sidewalk corridors, typically we have these, we think of sidewalks as having these different zones. There's the frontage zone next to the buildings, the pedestrian zone or the walk talk zone. And then there's a furniture zone where we put all the stuff that needs to go on our streets. So here's a quick poll. Let's see if we can do this one quickly. What should be the minimum width for side? Actually, did I never close that? Maybe I did. Minimum width for sidewalks. Okay. So let's pick one of these quickly. You've only got 5 choices there. Okay. Let's see what people said, Mary Beth. Okay, 5 feet. A lot of you got it right. Now, it could be 6 and it could be 7. It depends. So I think there should have been maybe a third option, which was it depends. Because if you're in a downtown, you may want a wider sidewalk. But for 2 people to walk comfortably side by side, we typically need sidewalks that are at least 5 feet wide. Narrow sidewalks are great for young couples in love, as we see on the left. But for average sized folks, we need at least 5 feet. And if you're next to a wall or a fence, and if you're right next to the curb, you'd probably want another foot on each side. So those are some of the standards. We find 4 feet, which is allowed by Americans with Disabilities Act, often doesn't work for 2 adults or moms or dads with strollers because there's just not enough room there for them to walk side by side. We also want to have good buffers to sidewalks. So in a residential neighborhood, that planting strip works great to provide that buffer. We also have trees. In a more commercial area where the trees, the furniture that goes on the street, the hydrants and so on, they've created a buffer to the street. Parked cars are a great buffer that make you feel more comfortable when you're walking along the street. And in this case, where they didn't have the space to put in those buffers, just simply putting in that bike lane moves the cars away from the curb and makes it more comfortable for pedestrians. So one of my colleagues, actually the guy who invented the walk audit, Dan Burden, came up with, it was 21 benefits of bike lanes. And I think only 4 of those were for the bicyclists. The others are for motorists, for pedestrians, for emergency responders. We also don't want to build driveways like intersections. That's a mistake we often see in our town centers. We really want driveways to look like driveways where it's clear the pedestrian has the right of way. Here's an example of a nicely done one where there's 5-foot crossing. Notice that grade slows the traffic. And by having this furniture zone out here now, we don't have to slope the sidewalk. We simply have to put that slope out here. If we didn't have that furniture zone, that would make it more challenging to meet ADA because we'd have to figure out how to slope it and then still have a level area where people can walk. I'll talk briefly about crossings. We want to increase effectiveness of crosswalks with a lot of different tools. I'm not going to cover all of those. But the basic thing is, first of all, if we're going to have a crosswalk that's not at a stop or a signal, we want to make sure it's visible, not just to the pedestrian, but also to the motorist. So we want to have those long markings that the motorist can see. Here's another crosswalk related question. Is it legal to cross the street at an intersection where you don't have a stop or a signal if the crosswalk is not marked? So let's see how many have been studying their vehicle code recently. Okay, Mary Beth, how are we doing? Sorry to rush you, but. Okay, most of you got it right, 73%. Absolutely, yes, you may cross even if there's no marked lines on the crossing. Any intersecting streets, well, and it is a little tricky because the way the vehicle code says, any intersecting streets where you have an extension of the sidewalk establishes a crosswalk. So I'd have to go back and look in more rural communities where you may not have a sidewalk on the cross streets, but I think it still would be considered legal to cross there because you don't have to have the two lines. Now, motorists may not recognize that, pedestrians may not feel comfortable there, but it still is legal. Now, here's part 2 of this question. So this is sort of like 7B. Is it legal to cross the street in the middle of the block? Of any street, if we look at, block lanes, can we cross in the middle of the street? Yes, no, or it depends. Okay, let's see. It depends. Absolutely correct. Yes, because the way the vehicle code says is it's not legal to cross if you're between two signalized or police controlled intersections. But if you're in a residential neighborhood where you don't have a signal on each corner, right, on each block, then you may cross mid-block. But the onus, the responsibility for yielding is on the pedestrian now. The motorist doesn't have to yield to you. You have to yield to the motorist. So just important thing to know, and for all of us to teach our kids.
I do have an attorney friend who indicated to me that in Loomis, you can cross between the drugstore and the laundromat, and you can cross between town hall and that building there because the parking is in the back and you walk to the front, and it is legal to go across without a crosswalk right there.
Really? Is there not
Yes.
Is there not a signal on the next block? I think that probably is why.
There is a signal in the next block, and there's not one by the drugstore, but
Okay, interesting. I'll have to check it out. Good to know. So lighting is really important for pedestrians because 50% of pedestrian crashes occur at night. So if you're going to put a crosswalk in, especially one where there's no signal or stop, make sure to light it. And we ideally want to light it ahead of the crosswalk like we see here or here, not directly on top of the people, because that will actually shine light on them as they're crossing. Curb extensions. You've got some curb extensions, I think. Did I see curb? Yes, I did see curb extensions in Loomis. Basically, what you're doing is you're taking that space at the intersection where the vehicles cannot park, and you're giving it back to the sidewalk. So here, instead of having a 58-foot crossing, you've now shortened that significantly to, to 32 feet, right? You can all see that. So you get several advantages. Jeez. Better visibility, because now the pedestrian is located where they can be seen and see the motorist. You also get some traffic calming because you slow cars entering or exiting a street, and you get some room for street furniture. So it's a win-win. If you had a signal here, you also would make it more efficient for the motorist because you wouldn't have to hold them back as long, because we calculate the signal timing from curb to curb. And with a shorter crossing now, you don't have to hold cars back as long. If you have a multi-lane street, like we see in this image, a median is extremely important because it now reduces crashes by almost 40, pedestrian crashes by 40%, and probably also vehicle crashes. So again, multi-lane roads with medians help a lot. You can help them a lot with medians. And you can also design the median now so that we get the proper behavior of the pedestrian by design. Remember, I talked about the proper behavior of the motorist by design. Because now the pedestrian is forced to look in the direction of oncoming traffic because of the way we've angled the crosswalk through the median. We have other tools like rectangular rapid flashing beacons. You have the in-pavement ones. These basically post-mounted flashers are replacing a lot of the in-pavement because they're much less expensive and they're easier to maintain. And we're starting to see more of those, and they actually work. They do get the attention of the motorist. Let me talk briefly about bicyclists so we can get through this. So earlier we asked you these questions. What kind of a bicyclist are you? Well, this is what we see at the national, or not national, but this is what we see in many communities. About 8%, 1% strong and fearless, 7% enthused and confident. So in your community, you actually have a much larger percentage. I forget what we had exactly, but it was more than 7. and then 60% interested but concerned. And then, of course, about a third saying no way, no how. So what that tells us is that the standard class 2 bike lane, that is that line on the street, right next to traffic, is only really going to be comfortable for about 8% of bicyclists. We also, when we develop a bicyclist system, we want to have a network. It doesn't all have to be the same type of facility. It can be a trail. It can be on street. It can be, in some cases, a shared street if it's a low volume, low speed street, or it can be bike lanes and other tools. One of the things we're starting to see more communities do is put in buffers to give bicyclists a little bit more space. So here's painted buffers. This is in Folsom, Fairfax, down in the Bay Area, where they said, we have the extra space, let's give that over to a buffer to the bicyclists. San Jose, Davis, here you'll notice they have a buffer not just on the side where the cars are traveling, but also on the parked car side, which is very important because you also get dooring crashes where a door gets open, and if there's not enough room, a bicyclist will hit that. The newest tool we have in California is what's called the Class 4 bikeway. And this is where we actually put a physical separation between the bikeway and either the parking or the travel lane. So I'll show you in a picture. It's much easier to see. So here's an example of one from the Los Angeles region. Notice the guy is, as his picture is being taken, we think, he's suddenly realizing, oh, I didn't put on my helmet, which is on his handlebars, because he felt comfortable enough riding there that it didn't even occur to him, oh, I have to put my helmet on. Notice there's no on-street parking here. This is just a buffer between basically the travel lane and the bicyclist, with some nice landscaping and so on. You already have a two-way bikeway, Class 4 facility without parking as well, near the high school, Del Oro High School. And there are other examples popping up all over California. Here's one in Long Beach where you notice they do have on-street parking. So they basically moved the parking out and put the bicyclists here. Some folks say it's better to use the cars to protect the bicyclists than the bicyclists to protect the cars. So that's the principle, I guess, here. And oops, sorry. And here's a two-way bikeway or cycle track. Let's see. So let's get back to this question. In which facility, you know what, I'm going to skip this one. It's the last one and we're running a little late on time. I do want to say that this is just one poll. It was done in Colorado, but we are seeing a renaissance in bicycling. More young people especially are saying they would like to be able to bike. More young people are moving to downtowns and older neighborhoods and driving less. So I think there is a real opportunity if we build out more bicycle facilities to attract, I guess, these millennials to our communities. Trees, I want to mention street trees, really important. You have a lot of trees in Loomis, but not a lot on, at least in some of the streets that I traveled, it felt like some of the streets didn't have a lot of trees on them. So something to consider, are there opportunities for more street trees? There are a lot of benefits, of course, to street trees, from saving energy, improving air quality, reducing CO2, reduces stormwater runoff, and increases property values. And this comes actually from a document we published back about 20 years ago on tree guidelines. We did it for several regions of the state. They actually quantified the benefit of trees and found that over 40 years, with cost factored in, trees can really have a significant benefit. The other benefit that we often don't think about is that when we have a shaded street, the maintenance costs actually go down. And this was done by the same group that did the other document. They looked at the city of Modesto, where they found that highly shaded streets didn't need slurry seals as often as the ones that were not well shaded. So just something, again, there's economics and fiscal issues here as well. I'm going to end by just talking about some placemaking strategies, places to gather, like we see here. This is in Monterey, where they took part of the street that they really didn't need anymore. This street came through and created a nice plaza. Place you can gather with just some benches, a little park, just set. Obviously, farmers markets are a great way to, bring people together and have them interact with one another. And one of the new techniques that communities are using are what are called parklets, where we take 1 or 2 parking spaces and we dedicate those to places where people can basically hang out. And if it's outside a coffee shop or restaurant, they have a place to sit. It also provides a place to put in a little bike corral, a place to park your bike. This is one in Davis, outside a restaurant. And you'll notice just down the street, they have a bike corral for bike parking. So it's the same principle, but in this case, place for people, and here a place for the bikes. And I like to tell this story. This is Modesto, where in the downtown, a group of people got together. It looks like this is, brick pavers and a very elaborate setup. But in fact, what they did, here you can see before the brick pavers went in, they just put in the planters, and then they just stenciled in, right, what looked like brick pavers, stenciled in the coloring, and ended up with what you see here. But then over time, the city actually went back in, and that's that same intersection. You can see the subway sign in the background, and the city actually built out, more formal parklet. So these are things that can be done, relatively inexpensively. And the last thing I'll show you is you can do a temporary installation just to see if people like it. This is one that Kayla and I did in Salinas a few years ago, where you can come in and for a day we put in the different things you see here, the tables, the games for the kids, the chairs, etc. Public art, obviously you've got public art in your downtown, but I just want to reinforce that really can help. I don't know how many of you folks have been down to Exeter, but it's a town in it's Fresno County that, I don't know, 15, 20, 25 years ago, just started putting in more and more of these murals. I think this was the first one, and then they put in this park. And then right around the corner, you've got this, and it's all the murals are all telling the history of the town. It's now a tourist draw. If you go on their website, they've got tours and show you all the different murals, and it does draw people from around the state, and I would guess around the country even. And of course, in Loomis, you've done a great job, I think, with some of your murals, but I would encourage you to think of ways to even expand that art program more. And think also about other types of art, utility art. These were actually created in the little town of Laytonville by the 6th grade class. And this was in Visalia, they have a program called Art on Fire, where they have a fundraiser for Arts Visalia, where they have different folks go out and collect, I guess they get volunteers to sponsor them to go out and paint some of the hydrants. And finally, wayfinding. Make sure you good signage for not just for the motorists, but also for pedestrians. As we see here on the right, city of Carlsbad, just letting people know how to get to where they're going. So I'm going to end there. I did have some photos of small town of photo simulations, but we can we'll send you the presentation so you can see those. They're pretty, you can go through them pretty quickly, but we're running a little bit behind here, so I want to make sure we have time for our next activity. Let me just switch over. I guess I just need to switch. Can everybody now see what I'm showing? This is now a map on the right, on the left. Okay, everybody's got that? So before we jump into this, I know I'm rushing a little bit, but any comments, any questions about the presentation, anything that you wanted to ask? Okay, so I told you earlier that if you had comments that were not on that walk audit route, that this would be your opportunity to tell us about them. And we'll jump into that in a minute. But before that, I just thought I would open it up for some just general questions about Loomis. So the first one I thought I would just ask everybody to sort of chime in on is, what do you consider to be the heart of Loomis? Is there an intersection, a place, a store, a building? What would be your answer? Maybe each one of you, I think, should get a chance to pipe in, or at least some of you should. Well,
I'll start since nobody else is talking yet. But that intersection that we saw of Horseshoe Bar and Taylor Road is to me the heart. And that's just because as I grew up here as a little girl, my mom and dad used to let us ride our bikes from the rural part of Loomis all the way up there to where Taylor's is now. I would never even consider letting my kid do that these days, but I think that's the heart of our, at least in my opinion, is that intersection and straight on into our train depot.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great.
And I would agree. I think that, and also the train depot is becoming the heart. I mean, people just think of when you go to town, if you say where the train depot is, they know where to go.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Gary List commented in the chat, shed to shed in center of Horseshoe Bar Road and Taylor Road. So the shed to shed is from the Blue Goose to High Hand.
Mm-hmm.
I think High Hand is the heart of Loomis because of its sheer volume and interesting appeal.
It's definitely a popular place. When I was up there with my wife, we thought, well, let's stop in and get a meal here. There was an 1.5-hour wait. Any others? Have we captured them all? Okay.
So I'm sorry, this is Bonnie. I would also add the library just in terms of public gathering because of the programs and services, and even just the space around the library, which it offers.
Right. Okay.
I have another comment in the chat from Tilon Durko. Heart of Loomis is Horseshoe Bar and Taylor's, LBB, Reds, and the train depot.
Okay.
Yeah, I think everybody's covered it. If you have to pinpoint more narrowly down Horseshoe Bar and Taylor, but to encompass, the main part of downtown Loomis, if you want to think of it, it's shed to shed, and then a little bit farther down to where the library is.
Okay.
And then including the train depot. So that would be kind of the real core downtown area.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Favorite streets. Now this, I think maybe we'll get different answers or more different answers. Let's see.
Well, my favorite street is Wishing Well Way.
Okay. And you said, is it dirt or part of it is dirt path?
It's a dirt path. And every time I drive down it, I was able to buy back my family home a while back. And it just, every time I drive down it, I love it, but I'm also off of our other streets, which are stressful to drive on. So.
Right. Yeah, dirt roads will slow you down.
Let me ask, is that dirt path access you drive down public or private?
Private.
Are we talking about street downtown, or just in Loomis?
Anywhere, I think anywhere. But it can be downtown. Yeah.
I particularly like King Road and Taylor, especially when the high school graduating class decorates the center.
Right. Yeah, I saw that.
I think I like Magnolia Street right on the other side of Taylor. It's just the big trees and it's wide. It's just, I don't know. I like Magnolia.
Okay, good. And we're not even asking you why. You can just throw out name.
A comment from Gary List on his favorite street, Horseshoe Bar Road, makes us immediately feel in a rural area. Okay. And Bonnie commented that she likes Magnolia too.
Okay, cool. Let's move on. And we can come back to this, of course, if folks want to add to it. But primary destinations. What would you? We often like to think about, okay, where are the places that, most people are traveling to? And it's usually often schools, it's, the library, it's the
post office.
Post office, right. Okay.
How about the hardware store?
Hardware store.
Yeah.
A lot of our businesses do not have their mail delivered to them, so they have to go to the post. They have to have a post office box.
Mm-hmm. Schools. Can we add schools to this?
Yeah, definitely.
And the bank.
Okay.
And Rayleigh's.
Bank, Rayleigh's.
Shopping.
And Blue Goose.
Blue
I
Goose
have
Event
Blue
Center.
Goose, yeah.
Okay.
You know,
High-end.
Thursdays through Sundays, all the restaurants in town.
Yeah. Yep.
From Gary Liss, he says feed store, Rayleigh's, hardware store, schools.
Okay. You're becoming
store.
Gary's channeler.
I am. Tim says primary destination, Del schools, or Del Oro schools, parks, Blue Goose, businesses off Swetzer. So that gets you over into the industrial zone.
Okay.
I think if we haven't got it, Taylor's and LBB and Pizza Factory.
I do think Foothill Feed Store brings a lot of people into town.
Does.
So Kayla, I think the section of Swetzer is not necessarily with restaurants. That's sort of a separate. And I can't edit while you're writing, so I'll let you fix that. Okay. Now, would you consider all of the above that we've identified as primary destinations as walkable?
Another couple, Gander Tap House and the Fruit Market at the
Okay.
Blue Goose.
Blue Goose, more Blue Goose.
More Blue Goose.
Okay. How often are there large events at the Blue Goose? Is that every once in a while or? Yeah.
No, every weekend.
Every weekend.
In a non-COVID situation.
Okay.
And we have Cowboy Poetry. They'll be from Thursday night until Cowboy Church on Sunday. You'll have 450 people at each event, and sometimes 2 events a day.
Wow, amazing. Is that owned by the city?
The
Event center?
It's leased from the property is leased from the city. It belongs to the South Placer Heritage Foundation.
Okay. Okay, walkable destinations. Let's just mark, are there any of the above that you'd say are not walkable? Let's just say all of the above, except which ones would be exceptions?
If Swetzer Industrial is up there, it's not necessarily walkable.
Okay.
But I mean, it's close enough to walk to.
It's close enough to walk to, but it borders on not very, it's not very comfortable to walk there, no.
Actually, there are quite a few people who walk over to the brewery itself, LBB, that actually walk from their homes over to down Swetzer.
Yeah, I think Swetzer's okay to walk on. I mean, there's sidewalks.
Okay. Any others? Or do we think all of these really are walkable or could become more walkable? Let's just keep it at that.
Oh, yeah. We definitely improve all of them.
Bobby commented that several schools are not walkable. And Tim said Indian Creek is a popular draw.
Okay. So I'll put Indian Creek up here, Kayla.
Swetzer may be walkable.
Which one?
Swetzer may be walkable, but the corner looks really cruddy. It's all grown over
Okay.
up and it's ugly.
Okay, so we should qualify that, I guess. So Swetzer industrial area, yes, but
Needs cleanup.
corner needs cleanup. Okay. So which school was not easy to access via walking? Was it the elementary or the high school? Or
Well,
middle?
in the town limits of Loomis, you have Loomis Grammar and you have Del Oro High School, and with the extension, at H Clark Towers, but it's in a neighborhood, so I think the in-town schools are rather walkable, especially with the bicycle lane extension that just recently happened all the way out to Del Oro. I think that was a huge help.
Okay.
But it's the ones that are outside of Loomis are definitely not walkable.
Okay. So I want to move us on to the map because I want to make sure, first of all, we capture some of the comments we heard about earlier. So you can see on this map, and we can zoom in pretty tight. So I want to go back to some of the locations that folks, now the only thing we've already put on the maps are bus stops. So basically it's open season. If you want to have us add, locations where there's safety, you think there are safety issues. And I think a few folks mentioned that some of the parts along Horseshoe Bar Road do feel unsafe. I think the on and off ramps at 80 to me did not look, they look pretty hairy. I don't know about all of you, but
Oh, yeah.
so,
Yeah.
okay.
I have an additional comment on the schools. And from Gary Liss, he says, safe paths to schools is what needs help.
Okay. So I'm going to put that on opportunities for improvement, safe paths to schools.
So the corner of Sierra College and Taylor, Brace is just down from there, and there's neighborhoods. That's where I live. If you're walking into town, it's about a mile into town. That corner of Sierra College and Taylor is not a great corner to make the turn and walk into town. It's just not super safe there.
So we were now at Sierra College.
Yeah, lower.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Sierra College and Taylor.
So it's only about a mile to the middle of town, but so if you wanted to walk from my neighborhood, it's just not real safe, that corner.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kayla, you've got that? Any other, now locations, some folks mentioned speeding in some areas. Any places we want to capture?
Well, I did say something about the crosswalk down in town.
Yes.
They've done better. We've gotten different signs that are a lot better, but it seems people are distracted. They don't see them stepping out from the post office or the town hall into crossing there. And it's, I don't know what can be done more, brighter paint there or something, but it is,
well,
I mean, even me, sometimes I forget, like, oh, there's somebody stepping over, I try real hard, but so speeding through Taylor can happen.
Okay.
Paul, question for you. Would you like to hear our wish list? Like what we see a big picture, or are you just talking about smaller improvements?
I think both. I think I'd like to start with just capturing specific locations. So it's maybe smaller improvements, and then big picture, we have on the side, and you haven't been seeing this because it's such a big board. We have what needs improvement, and then also how best to improve, and then just other comments. So we can take those if you want to switch to sort of big picture.
Well, I think the biggest picture is our overpasses are they really have, need to be addressed. The I-80 Horseshoe Bar Road overpass needs to be widened. If we could have an exit and entrance on King Road, that would be helpful. And we also probably need an under or overpass for Sierra College Boulevard by the railroad tracks there. If a train ever comes and stops everything, we literally have no way to get over that railroad track. So to me, that's the three big, huge items that would be great. And then all of our rural roads don't have bike lanes, and they're very, very dangerous. And then my final one is if you go zooming into Magnolia Street, right in town, that's the old part of town, Magnolia. They have no sidewalks there. And so I think it would be, if the residents want them, which is one of the things I think I'd like to try to find out.
It's a pretty wide street.
It is a pretty wide street, but it could be, there's room for it if the resident wants it. And I think, design wise, it's fine because it is the old section of town. It is kind of your urban, in a sense of speaking, urban core, where it would read small town, but yet, that you would definitely be clued in that you're in the middle of a small town with some nice neighborhoods and sidewalks. So, I think it's fine there. On the I-80 and King Road interchange, I really wish to have that looked at seriously as a not to happen. many people have mentioned King and I-80. The Penryn Road exit is not far from there. And I really think that will just really be a very big detriment to the town to have all that. I know it diverts traffic and it sends traffic from Horseshoe Bar over to King and I-80, but the Penryn exit is there. And I think being that is kind of your more rural entrance to town, having a extensive highway interchange there would be just a killer, in addition to that it is, really close to where the high school is. So to me, keeping King Road less traveled would be much better. And, putting a highway interchange there would just encourage a lot more traffic on King Road. I understand.
I wanted to get back to the, sorry, Roman, I wanted to just get back to the sidewalk issue on Magnolia Street. One thing I wanted to mention is not every sidewalk necessarily has to be a curb sidewalk, a very urban type of sidewalk. There are sort of more rural examples where you basically have, a sidewalk, but without a curb and sometimes a swale that just allows water to filter. So if you want to keep a more rural look to a community, there are there are other ways to do it. So I would encourage, if you're going to approach residents on that street about sidewalks, to give them some choices. You can either have curb and, more formal gutter and sidewalk, or you can do basically a sidewalk with a more rural look. And unfortunately, I didn't put that image in here, but I can send that to you.
So the other place I think that we noted already was at the Blue Goose Shed, where there is parking in front, and similar to the High Hand Shed, which is on the other side of town. Right. There is parking in front as well again, but I think the actual pedestrian approach, or walking along the High Hand Shed, seems to be a lot more inviting. Meaning that there isn't a sidewalk there, but I think people actually use like the boardwalk, if you want to call it that, of the Blue Goose, of the High Hand as the sidewalk, so that you walk along that directly along the side of the building on that boardwalk area. So it kind of functions as this public sidewalk, if you will.
Yeah.
So I thought that works well. It's inviting. I'm not sure if something like that could be done on the Blue Goose end of things. To keep your parking. I mean, I find it difficult with the parking there, just because sometimes with all the traffic on Taylor Road, it's actually not easy to get in and out of that front parking right there. That is quite congested at times, and actually it's not easy to get in and out of the parking right in front of the building right there.
In front of High Hand or
Blue Goose.
Blue Goose.
And High Hand kind of the same way, yes.
Yeah. But your idea, I think, of bringing the sidewalk back might be, an alternative that could work well. It's a direct. Now you are sort of forcing people out of direction of travel. People like to walk straight lines, but that would be one option. The other reason it might work better than High Hand is that it seems like a longer stretch without a sidewalk. And maybe if there were segments and still you'd have driveways in at various points. I don't know. It would need to be studied carefully, particularly if you want to have those front end parking spots.
We have studied that pretty thoroughly. It's been looked at for quite a while and much discussion. One of the things that we definitely need, well, a couple things. One of them is Interstate 80 off ramp onto Horseshoe Bar. Really needs to have a bypass road to the south of the freeway, which connects King Road, because that would stop all the traffic going through town to get to King Road to go out to Auburn Folsom Road and other areas out there. In addition to that, there needs to be some connection, and I would think it would go somewhere along the Placer County Park, and it would connect to Horseshoe Bar. That would stop a lot of the traffic coming from the Laird Road area that goes through town now. In the mornings, you'll find that the traffic is very busy there. Both of those could be worked. I mean, we get when if they were able to go alongside there's a street off of Horseshoe Bar, and I forget the name of it. It's directly to the left of the stop sign at Horseshoe Bar. If you turn left and you were to go straight rather than make the first right-hand turn, there's a roadway that goes through there almost to Interstate 80. And I wouldn't propose putting all the traffic down through that road, but there may be a better place to make that connection for that. And I did like the roundabouts that were proposed for Horseshoe Bar off-ramp as well as Library Drive. And that seemed to be a really good plan that I think we really need to look at. Thank you.
Kayla, were you able to capture all that? I was looking for your note taking, but maybe I
Yeah,
wasn't
I'm
looking in the
definitely
right.
capturing everything. I think the
Okay.
only thing that was a little like I didn't get quite well was, let me see. Oh, I think it's under the second purple sticky note under how best to improve. Connect park to Horseshoe Bar Road to lessen traffic. You were mentioning.
So there's a park on King Road.
Okay.
And if we were to put a road that went over to Horseshoe Bar and connected somewhere at Horseshoe Bar, it would take a lot of the traffic that goes in through town in the morning to the grammar schools and the high schools and whatever. It could make a difference, I think, to the downtown traffic.
Okay. Interesting.
So, Russ, what you're saying is obviously frontage roads from King to Horseshoe Bar Road on either side of the freeway, right?
Yeah. And that I have to qualify that a little bit because I think that frontage road also stops, at least on the south side of the freeway, it stops the traffic that's backing up on the freeway now. So if you're coming off the freeway, I mean, you got a straight shot down to King Road, and it's a very valuable thing, I think, to somehow purchase before it gets too much more populated, but it could also be part of conditions of approval for some of the property.
Okay, interesting.
Yep.
So
I
I just want to do it. Sorry, I want to just do a quick time check. We are almost at 5 o'clock. If folks can continue on for a little longer, that's great.
I don't want to take up too much, but I just have two more comments
Sure.
about the way signs. I think those are super important for it. I thought we were talking about just downtown. So my notes were more about downtown. And you know how you talked about the coming into town, there's the sign across from the chamber. There is actually a small one down coming in from Sierra College. Well, just past Sierra, when you go over Sierra College on Taylor into town, but
Okay.
there's also that corner that is approval. It's on the corner of Sierra College and Taylor, the opposite side I was talking about, for a sign to go in to point people downtown. And I would like to, as when I was working at the chamber, I was trying to get that done, but it was very expensive. But I would like to put it on the wish list.
Okay, so
we already have
sign.
the approval for that from the railroad. So
Okay. And that's down at this location. Okay.
Yeah. Wayfinding, definitely.
Wayfinding, parking, yes.
Okay.
And parking, like, people don't know about the parking lot behind the post office area.
Right.
You go there in the evening time for dinner, people are all crammed in trying to figure out places to park, but you walk just behind and it's completely empty.
And you have a lot of parking there.
And there's a lot of parking there. People
Yeah.
just really need to know it's there. And, it takes but a minute to walk to the restaurant you want to get to.
Right. Yeah. Some good signage that would indicate that would let people know. Wayfinding, as Jenny mentioned. Okay.
Brief
Any
comment
other-
on the, I have a brief comment on the Rayleighs and I-80 pedestrian crossing there. It's very dangerous. Unfortunately, it's controlled by Caltrans, so we really can't do much about it. But one of the problems is that there is a light, but there's an island in the middle, and if there's not enough time to get across, especially if you might be disabled or slow, there's no button or anything, and you're trapped in the middle trying to get across sometimes pretty busy traffic. So that is, I think, not a very good situation already. And if there's development in that subdivision that's currently labeled Heritage Park, you're going to have even more traffic. And if people are encouraged to walk to Rayleigh's and the businesses, that's even more people that are trying to get across basically freeway entrance and exit traffic to get to Rayleigh's.
Right. And even though it is Caltrans and it's not, a town facility, knowing this and being able to communicate to Caltrans and complaining, basically saying, this is basically a substandard interchange that needs to be, analyzed. Caltrans is also now has directives to address pedestrian safety in their work. So I think that would be definitely worth doing.
I have a couple of comments from Gary Liss.
Okay.
He loves Russ's ideas of frontage roads on either side of I-80 from King to Horseshoe Bar, and also would like Swetzer Road extended south to Sierra College Boulevard to help get traffic off Taylor.
Okay. You got that, Kayla? I'm not able to see the note taking always at the side, but we'll.
Yep, I'm frantically, fervently
Okay.
writing them.
Frontage both sides. Okay.
I'm looking at the map, and do we actually own, the town actually has that little tiny strip along the freeway all the way to King? I thought that was part of the park, but maybe it isn't. If you're on the south side of the freeway, at King Road, it looks like the town boundary so there is some space.
Yeah, this is the town
within
boundary.
town.
Yeah, this is the town boundary here.
So we do have town owned, I mean, not town owned, but that's within our town jurisdiction. As far as all the way up to King, I didn't realize that. I thought that was part of the park, so the county park. So that's good.
Yeah, this yellow line you see here is town boundary.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else?
You forgot two signs. Well, a couple signs. One of them is there's a town monument sign at just up from Sierra College on Taylor.
Okay.
It's in the middle of the street. It was put in by the Boy Scouts.
Okay.
Same location is an FFA sign on the right-hand side. There's also another one at the town boundary to the north and east on Taylor. And there's also one behind right adjacent to the monument coming, the town monument sign coming in on Horseshoe Bar. I think we're the only town around that's got 3 FFA signs.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think we captured, you're right. I don't think we got all of them. But the first one you mentioned was that on Sierra College?
No, it's just up from Sierra College to the east.
On Taylor?
Yeah, it's right in the middle of Taylor.
Okay, I'll put a little check
Right
mark
across
there.
from the camp sites or the campground.
Right.
Tell me when I'm close. Do you see my little check mark moving?
Oh,
you got to go down towards Sierra College more.
Okay,
It's you kind of got a little triangle on it already.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this will be a check mark. Okay, that's cool. We'll have a check mark as well. That's supposed to indicate good example or something good is there. Okay. Any final comments, ideas? Now, I want to remind everybody that if we were doing this all in person, it would be a lot simpler because you would be sitting at the maps yourselves and you would have a marker and pen, and you could talk amongst yourselves, and you'd be able to write and mark the map up. This is clunky because we're having to take your comments and basically do it ourselves, and we're not as knowledgeable of your town as you are. But I think we have captured a lot of great ideas, so I think that's good. Anything, and I think this, again, can inform the general plan process. It can inform city leaders in terms of future projects. And I encourage you to sort of continue to do these, with the community as you move forward. I think, we always, yes,
Bonnie
go
has a
ahead.
question.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I did have one more suggestion, and it's kind of a small one. But over at the depot, there is a strip that currently has some chairs for sitting that seems very underutilized, and it would be a really nice spot for placemaking. But additionally, Jan and I were just there a couple days ago, and people are using the parking lot as kind of a throwaway to bypass parts of Taylor that gets congested. And so trying to figure a calming solution there too.
A few speed humps might do the job. Particularly in a parking lot. You don't want cars speeding through parking lots.
I think
Before 8 o'clock, you're on your own out there. Don't be walking around out there.
Gary Liss asked if we included the Swetzer Road Business Park sign.
Ooh.
And Ramona wants to know if diagonal parking along Taylor would help slow traffic down.
Well, diagonal parking definitely slows traffic down. But the issue is, do you have the space, and are the speeds, the speeds have to be fairly low, because you can't put diagonal parking where cars are going too fast. I will throw out something that, may shock a few people, but there is a safer way to do diagonal parking, which is called back-end angled. I can already see Jenny saying no. Okay.
Well, no, we had this conversation when this project went in, when we did the streetscape. That was a long conversation about.
Okay, I won't even go there. Some communities have done it, but they've done it on secondary streets.
Tied to the end.
Sorry, I was saying some communities have done back-end, but they've done it on secondary streets just to test it out, let people get comfortable with it, and then over time, if people sort of understand how it works and feel comfortable, they put it on a major street. But you don't start with putting it on, say, Taylor Road. I mean, you'd have to look at other places. Any other comments, questions? I mean, we can continue. I don't want to cut off the conversation, but I do know we had scheduled this to end at 5, so I don't want to go too much further beyond 5.
Well, I think one of the things that has come to my mind as I've been watching this presentation, which is just phenomenal and excellent. It's definitely great to have all of this feedback. But I wish the circulation committee would have been invited to come to this, because I think that it really is affecting both of our committees and obviously the whole town. So Mary Beth, I'd really like to, once we get this on, make sure we send the link to the circulation committee, because this is really, really important. And it's great to hear everybody's feedback.
I agree, and I'd like to have them look at the mini circles he talked about. Those were really kind of neat. That, like on web, that would stop some of the traffic right there. If it wasn't really a full-on circle, but a mini circle right there, I think they need to look at that. Transportation and circulation needs to look at that.
And Kayla, again, I don't know what our sort of our scope is, but maybe there's an opportunity to do a presentation for the circulation committee. I don't know. I'll leave that aside, but that maybe.
I think that would be amazing. I would say thank you to infinity.
And we did notice all committees of this presentation, this workshop. So I will reach back out to all of the committees and share the video with them so that they can watch it at their leisure. I was impressed with all the information and thoughtfulness that came out of this.
Okay.
And Mary Beth, even, you know, potentially having people comment on this from other committees, or weigh in on the map, add to this board, something like that. If not even a presentation, that might be really useful.
Yeah. And again, I think, Kayla, we can look at how things are going, but I'd be happy to do a presentation for the circulation committee.
That'd be great.
I'll put it out there. I'm semi-retired, so you know, I don't always have to bill for my time.
Yeah, well, we would appreciate it, and I think all of us are interested in getting as much feedback as we can, and that committee is, you know, definitely would have their ideas as well, which would be great for our general plan update for sure.
Exactly. I think Andy would benefit, right, Andy?
Paul, you know, and everyone could tell me to stop asking questions because I know we are going over a bit, but I would definitely be interested in just one more time going back to the board and some of the questions we have here and seeing if there are other areas we haven't looked at that could really use help, that are really, you know, unsafe or are good examples for people who walk and bike. You know, I know we talked a lot about vehicle access on the frontage roads along 80. You know, I don't know if that's necessarily a place for people, you know, I don't know even if there are bike paths or anything like that there, but I just would be curious, even at the intersections with existing on and off ramps, if there are issues for bikes and peds.
Oh yeah.
Opportunities. I mean, I would just, if you guys even throw out a couple more good and bad things, that'd be great.
Well, if you go to the very edges of our town, all the way to the edge, for instance, on Laird Road, it's a good example. Where Loomis ends and Placer County starts, this beautiful wide road opens up for bikes and peds, and it goes to Franklin Road. But so literally, you know, all these arterial roads, Barton Road, Laird Road, King Road, all of them have issues and they're dangerous.
Okay.
Boyington's kind of is pretty unsafe too. You know, that area that goes in the back area of Delaware. There's been talk that might get repaved this year, or talk that Placer County may be working on something with the town, but that area is, you know, needs some love.
What area? Sorry.
Right up here, Kayla.
Got it. Okay.
It's Boyington, the back end of Delaware.
Got it.
It's actually the entrance to the football field.
They come in around this way.
Yeah. There's no pedestrian area at all on that section, and there are some housing. Not a lot of housing, but there is some housing back there. Then it gets pretty dangerous as you meander towards King Road, right there too. That whole exit entrance area in the back end of Delaware, it needs some love.
Okay.
You know, it almost needs a stoplight because of the fact I go there on a regular basis 2 or 3 times a week to take my grandson to school, and it's very busy there.
If I can mention to the committee that the town has put up their social pinpoint site, and you can actually go in and do pretty much like this comment about a location. So it's broken down by the conservation element, parks and recreation, circulation.
Excellent.
So that just went up a couple days ago, and I think we have about 4 or 5 people already engaged in that process. So that's
cool.
That Mary Beth, you might want to put the link on the chat here, but definitely we're looking, that's going to be up throughout this process.
Now you tell us, Andy, we could have been using that instead of us trying to guess.
I like your format's a little bit different than social pinpoint, so I think this is good.
Okay.
I think it's working out well.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think those, I mean, I've worked with a number of communities where they set up these online maps that people can write comments on, and they can be phenomenal to get really robust input on. So that's great that you're doing that.
I'd like to add that I think it's important that any developments that come in, we really encourage the walkability part within those developments, and because we want people out of their houses and walking to the commercial areas. And so, you know, I don't know how we beef that up. Maybe staff can recommend on, you know, how we get that worded in the general plan. But, you know, if Turtle Island's ever developed, we want to encourage people to be able to walk over the overpass and get into downtown. You know, as little or as many as houses are there, maybe there's 10 houses in that development or 200, like, but at the very least, we want to make it walkable to the downtown.
Yep. And that's where connectivity is really important. That's why I did want to include that issue up front, because we see too many new neighborhoods that get built with, you know, basically disconnect themselves or don't connect themselves to the neighborhood. They put up sound walls. They put in cul-de-sacs that don't connect well. And it's okay to have, you know, cul-de-sacs, but you at least want to make sure that there's ways, you know, to make it more porous so people can get through. So
we also want to include the idea that maybe a lot of people are going to use little scooters, electric scooters, right, in the future, right? Maybe that becomes a much more popular thing than it is even today. So when we make our improvements, we want to include for you know, the areas for electric scooters.
Well, and that's where the bike lanes, I mean, what we're seeing in Sacramento, I live in Midtown Sacramento. I mean, we see a lot of scooter users using the bike lanes because they're basically going bicycle speed.
Yeah.
So bike lanes really can help, and bike facilities can help them as well.
I have a couple of comments from Gary Liss. First off, he says, this was fabulous. Great job to all. And then need to balance safety and the rural nature of our area. Trees are very close to streets, so it would be hard to add even bike lanes. And he doesn't want to take out the trees.
Right. No, you don't. But, you know, I would say one thing I'll add to the presentation, and before I send it out, is some of those examples of trails that are parallel to roads in more rural areas, because I think that's an opportunity that often is missed, where you put them behind the trees or you find a way. Now, maybe that's, you know, the lot lines wouldn't allow that, but there may be some locations where you can look to do that might really help. And those can be those multi-use trails. And I've worked on a number of projects where that's where the recommendation is basically to do that.
Ramona said, how about a traffic circle at King and Boynton? And then I did post the link to our social pinpoint page in the chat.
I guess she's thinking of a roundabout, right? Because it would be a fairly large, okay, yeah, not a difference between traffic circle and roundabout. So we got to make sure we don't mix them up.
Gary Liss also commented, maybe could have intermittent bike lanes between trees. That would add safety where there's right of way, but back to the street to pass the trees.
Yeah.
Put back.
Yeah. I mean, you can often, you know, you don't need more than about 4 to 5 feet to get the bike lane at least through. So it may be possible.
And last comment from Ramona, how would you make the Horseshoe Bar I-80 interchange more walkable if the interchange gets larger?
Well, it has to be done carefully. I think that's the key. There are designs for interchanges that do provide good accommodation for pedestrians, and Caltrans is now much more aware of this than they were when they built these freeways, you know, 50, 60, 70 years ago. So I think, you know, I think that's where you really try to, the town has to work with Caltrans to say, okay, how do we create crossings that work for both pedestrians and bicyclists? I don't know how many of you have been down 50 recently, but they redid the intersection with Watt Avenue a few years ago to accommodate a trail basically crossing that that freeway at Watt. And it's a pretty, as you can imagine, it was a big project, but they did do it. So this would be a much simpler one to the extent that it's not as, you don't have the volumes of traffic on Horseshoe Bar Road that you have on Watt Avenue.
I used
Sacramento.
to bike and walk across that
Yeah.
intersection on Watt Avenue. It's terrifying, and it's so much better because people do take it.
Yeah.
They do walk across these intersections.
Interchanges, yeah.
Interchanges, sorry.
And Maureen Valley commented, would a roundabout be feasible at Sierra College and Taylor?
That would
No,
probably you'd have to look at that very carefully. It would not, I don't think, well, we'd have to look at the volumes of traffic, but I think that's a pretty heavily traveled intersection. When you do get above about 20,000 vehicles per day at intersections on the both legs of the intersection, you start looking at two lane roundabouts.
And then we have the train there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are roundabouts near train tracks. I mean, it just, train comes through, you close it down. There's actually even one that has a train track right to the middle of the roundabout in Florida.
Wow.
Salt is the closest example I could think of a 2-lane roundabout, also in Elk Grove. I think they have a few out off Sheldon Road in the rural area.
Yeah. Well, and there's the one up at Tahoe off of 50.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Does anybody else have any other questions? This has been an amazing presentation. I mean, really, really wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul and Kayla. It's been great.
Thank you. You've been a great audience.
Mary Beth, has there been anybody out in the public that wanted to say anything? I know we're running short on time because I think there's another meeting for some of the people that are on this committee coming up at 6. But is there any public comment out there?
Any members of the public were brought in as panelists and are open mic and able to speak. So they've been available the whole meeting.
Okay. Great. So it looks like we've had, again, a super great presentation, a lot of really wonderful ideas. Thank you so much again. I'm grateful to you guys because these are really important topics for us. And if potentially you could do another presentation, I think it would just be a huge boon for our town. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So at this point, it looks like we will be having our next meeting on May 27th. Is that right, Mary Beth?
That's correct.
And in terms of homework, we had some things that we talked about at the last meeting. And I know that Bonnie brought up the vacant sites, which we now was posted, right? All of us can see that.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's also available on our website.
Okay. All right. So with that, I guess we will get ready to adjourn. Does that sound okay?
Nice.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
Sarah.
you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, LGC.
Thank you. We'll be in touch.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Robert.